So I wanted to talk about the sheer humiliation ritual, which is living in a Western country at this point. I'm going to particularly focus on the UK, although my first story, my first evidence that I'm going to cite, is a rather horrific case from Holland. I'm going to have to give a genuine trigger warning for this one because the details are utterly horrific. So turn off now if you don't want to know, and I don't think you should. But this gentleman here, as seen in the artist depictions of his court case, a rival in Holland, and he was taken in, perhaps rather unwisely, by a Dutch single mother. Perhaps she was a bit lonely, perhaps she wanted the company, and she thought it would be a good idea to take this chap in. And she had a newborn baby. Newborn. And this chap became rather upset that the mother was taking too long, spending too much time with a newborn baby rather than him. And so his response to this was to stab her 258 times. It gets worse, I'm afraid. He then rolled the infant around in her blood and posed for photos and videos of himself with the newborn and the dead mother, presumably because he thought this was amusing or something, or he got a bit of a giggle out of it. Now, that in itself is utterly horrific, of course, but it gets so much worse. You see, the prosecutors was only seeking 10 years in jail for this man. However, the judge, being a more enlightened chap, decided that actually, no, 10 years was far too harsh. He would only serve 5 years. 5 years for this crime. What to say about this? We live in a society which is so completely bereft of testosterone, so completely dominated by the feminine caregiving urge and feminine concerns, that because this man was assessed to have a low IQ, not that was prohibiting him from coming into Europe in the first place. No, that there was no impediment to this low IQ from stopping him from coming to Europe at all. But it is an impediment to him being held properly accountable for his crimes. I remember not so long ago there was a case when a chap he put a camera in his bedroom and he filmed himself with various women that he would take home. Now, this was entirely consensual sex, and don't get me wrong, he shouldn't have done it. It was very rude. That was bad. But he got 10 years in jail for that because that offended feminine sensibilities so strongly. Yet I think that being filmed is less bad than being stabbed to death and then having your infant rolled around in your blood. But of course, the feminine urge to care for these new arrivals who are perhaps not particularly bright, well, that was the reason the judge gave for not giving him a longer sentence, overwhelms. And so these people must be coddled. I question whether such a light sentence was actually sensible. Now let's turn to the thing that I really wanted to talk about in this, which is these characters. Mohammed something. You'll know him from Manchester Airport fame, where he broke the nose of a female police officer, and this was all on video. There was no dispute about what happened because, of course, it's on video. We get to see the whole thing. Now, unlike the Southport characters, who were up in front of a court within mere hours or at most days, it took 6 months to decide if we wanted to prosecute this chap. And then it took about another 3 or 4 months to actually get him to court. I remember a number of politicians, particularly Labour politicians, were saying that his arrest was disgraceful. The Muslim community even rioted at the notion of this man being arrested for, for what? For merely breaking a female police officer's nose in a hefty right hook, because they had to confront him and his, whatever it was, his brother or something, for their behaviour in the airport. Now, the interesting thing about this is when the case was going on, the case concluded, and it took a very long time for a sentence to be reached. Now, the Americans who had been monitoring this case, they kind of knew what was up here, because they've seen the same thing. They understand that when a jury takes a very long time to come to a verdict, it's not a good sign. Somebody on the jury has sympathies. And the point that I made in this tweet here is that you have to understand that we're only a few years away from not being able to get guilty verdicts for characters like this, because as we go through the demographic change, guilt or innocent becomes increasingly irrelevant. Only tribe will matter. Now, I did get quite a lot of pushback from native Brits when I put that up. There were a number of people, as it turns out, all of them boomers, who were in my comments saying, no, that's not how it works. Why are you even commenting on his ethnicity? That's not how it works. You just decide whether they're guilty or innocent. This is the data from, I believe this is the US, where they've studied this, where they've studied how the ethnicity of the jurors actually has a considerable impact on the verdicts they reach. It would seem that white people tend to decide whether somebody is guilty or innocent based on the evidence, but that is not what non-white groups do. They tend to find people of their own tribe guilty significantly less than average, and members of a different tribe considerably more guilty on average than the rest of the jurors. So the boomer idea, and I'm not accusing all boomers of this, of course, but the idea that we would have been steeped in if we watched a lot of TV, like a number of them do, is that of course we're all the same, absolutely everybody the same. That chap who spent the first 25 years of his life herding goats in Afghanistan, or is from Eritrea, or Morocco, or depths of rural regions of Pakistan. He's basically exactly like John and Marjorie from Margate. He thinks the same way, he has the same values, but unfortunately, the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that is not the case. Why is that important? Well, as Matt Goodwin here points out, what is the most popular boy's name in this country? It's Mohammed. Now, Matt has missed that the party that he supports is actually run by somebody who is called Mohammed. I don't know if that escaped his notice, but the issue is, we just can't have guilty verdicts for situations like this for much longer. There is a provision in UK law for this, which is to say that if a unanimous verdict cannot be reached, then they will accept a majority verdict. Now, majority does not mean 7 out of 12. It actually means at least 10 out of 12. So what does that mean? Well, it only means that 3 people on any given jury need to have tribal loyalties which outweigh the facts, and no longer is it going to be the case that people are going to be convicted of doing things that we find utterly beastly. And this is despite the fact of where I started with this, which is, even if they are found guilty, their sentencing might not be what we expect because of liberal sensibilities that permeate the class of people who operate courts and are appointed as judges. It's also worth noting excellent tweet here from Wolf, who brought up a study that was swiftly buried. The police did a study onto Muslim police officers, and it found, and this is reported in The Guardian, no less, back in 2006. You probably haven't heard about it because it was buried. And this high-level report concluded that Muslim officers are more likely to be corrupt than white officers because of their cultural and family backgrounds. This is real. The entire world does not think like John and Marjorie from Margate. They think in terms of tribe. So, okay, now let's turn our mind to sentencing, because on this occasion, even though it took a long time for the verdict to come in, Mohammed was actually found guilty in the end, although his accomplice, who is also on video, filmed assaulting another police officer. He manages to walk free because no verdict could be reached in that case. But we will be watching to see what sentence is handed out to Mohammed in this case. Now we've got some. Let me click through this. We have got some examples. So look, this chap who was caught up in the rioting following the Southport massacre of children by an immigrant. He rather unwisely threw a brick towards the police line, and I don't believe the officer was harmed. Might have hit a shield or something, or a bit of protective clothing. But that bit of brick landed him in jail for 2 years and 8 months. This guy, he broke a police window. And I'm not condoning any of this. Obviously that is bad. You shouldn't do that. It's very, very, very naughty indeed to be breaking police windows. He got 3 years in jail for that. This is an even more apt example. So this guy found himself right up against the police and took umbrage to the use of batons, grabbed the baton of the police officer. The police officer then sort of pulled it back. He then released the baton, and the police officer ended up breaking their nose. So for breaking the nose of a police officer, he got 4.5 years in jail. And bear in mind, this happened within days of the event, not 6 months to decide if they wanted to charge him. There was no riots from his community saying that it was an umbrage that he was even facing the prospect of this. No, none of that. Nothing that happened in the earlier case that we talked about with Mohammed. But no, 4.5 years in jail for this guy. He'll probably end up serving longer than that guy, that Dutch arrival that we began talking about. But of course, there's something different about the last 3 characters that I've showed you to Mohammed. What about this example? Here we have an actual Mohammed. Mohammed on the left there, he committed 22 crimes, including sexual abuse of 16-year-olds. And he was sentenced to 15 months in prison. The chap on the right, British taxi driver, goes by the name of Andrew, not Mohammed, Andrew. And he was sentenced to, it says there, 90 months in jail for social media posts. Right. So sexually abusing 16-year-olds amongst 21 other crimes. Well, I don't know how many of those crimes were sexual offences against 16-year-olds. Maybe there's some other stuff mixed in there. But 22 crimes, 15 months versus 90 for saying things that the state doesn't like. Now, is it particularly surprising? There's an example of a video I showed. Let's just let it play here. Let me just double check the sound. Yes, sound is off. So a British police officer is having a bit of a rumble with an urban chap, and you will note that nobody is coming to his defence. In fact, it might have already happened, but maybe in a second you'll see a chap with a local chap with an umbrella just stroll past. He has no interest of getting involved and helping the police whatsoever. People are happy to film it on their phone. People are willing to attack the officer. In a minute, we might even see the officer's colleague, a policewoman, come up and rather ineffectually attempt to engage the people assaulting her colleague. It doesn't seem to do much, and she looks absolutely bloody terrified. But can the police really expect anything different when they have been the enforcers of the state's will? And the state's will is to arrest people for what you say, while helping them import as many people as possible, and then going out and arresting the people who complain about it. Right. But fear not, the state has equipped itself with tools to deal with this problem. So the online harms bill. The reason given was that it is protect children from porn. So just to confirm, the government, which is importing tens of thousands of people from extremely, not hundreds of thousands, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but millions. The government, which is importing millions of people from incredibly countries, some of whom go on to do the things in our first story, the Dutch case. The government, which is importing people from places where child rape is just a cultural fact that we have to accept and we have to tolerate. British soldiers serving in Afghanistan were told to overlook child rape because it is simply part of their culture. The government is importing millions of people from these places. Oh, but no, the government is actually really concerned with children being exposed to some naughty parts online, and they're going to bring in censorship. Well, that argument held up for about 12 hours, and then they started using it to censor protests against the government and blocking. It was Epping, I think it was. It was the Epping protests against the government's immigration policy. No, it started being used to block that. If you're the Daily Mail, you're allowed to cover this. So the Daily Mail mentioned the protests, the immigration protests, but of course they can be relied upon to cover it in a way that the government can deem acceptable. They can show the right pictures of a large group of people looking jolly angry and a couple of very worried-looking police officers. I'm sure if the camera had pulled back slightly, you'd find that there's actually a huge wall of police officers at that point who are very excited about the prospect of being able to use their baton and get lots of these people thrown in jail for 60 or whatever it was, 19 months if they then go home and post something about it online, and that isn't really acceptable. So yes, this news can come out. It just can't come out from people who show perhaps a little too much detail, the bit that isn't carefully curated. I mean, more broadly, we are a nation which is in total decay, complete and total decay. I mean, one example is this. Yesterday, the British airspace was closed down. Flights were cancelled, holidays were ruined. Why was British airspace closed? Not a bloody clue. Couldn't tell you. We will no doubt hear in due course that it was the Russians. I mean, it's always the Russians, isn't it? It was a Russian cyber attack, no doubt. I don't know if that's true. Probably not. I kind of doubt it. They haven't even bothered with that excuse so far, but I'm sure that will pop out. But I mean, who knows? Is it DEI hires? Is it that air traffic control got blocked by the online harms bill? Do air traffic controllers need to install a VPN or provide proof of age, or what is it? Not a bloody clue. Couldn't tell you, because they never tell us anything. They don't tell us a damn thing. And it makes it really difficult to do what we do here at the Lotus Eaters, because they don't tell us anything, and we don't want to go with the carefully scripted messaging. We don't want to just sit here and do what the rest of the media does, which is just read out government press releases and corporate press releases. We kind of want to cover what actually matters to people, but it's very bloody difficult to know what's going on because they never tell us anything, and they don't respond, and they just cover stuff up. And it's probably on purpose, because invariably, if you end up covering stuff, well, what happens is sooner or later you're bound to make a mistake. And then, of course, they can come after us because we've made a mistake and we've spread disinformation. It doesn't matter that the only reason we made a mistake is because everything is so heavily censored and curated, and they never bother to provide us with any details of anything ever, that it becomes almost inevitable that at some point we're bound to make a mistake. But then they can come after us, which is kind of the point. It is a chilling mechanism. You're not supposed to actually know what the online harms bill allows you to do or not. You're supposed to spend all your time thinking, can I say this? If I say it in the wrong way, am I going to get my door smashed in at 4 o'clock in the morning and police running up the stairs, scaring the shit out of my wife and my kids while they're screaming, police, 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 and you get arrested because you said something that the state doesn't like? That is genuinely the situation that we're in now. And we just don't know what we don't know. How much more is being censored? I mean, Faraz, my colleague here at the Lotus, he asked this question, do you remember that story I covered a while back about those young Ukrainian male models? Very young lads, very pretty boys. They seem to have a problem with the Prime Minister. And that story just disappeared. Nobody in the mainstream media wanted to cover it. We covered it very, very carefully, I might add, because we didn't want to get arrested, and we will be arrested if we cover it in the wrong way. So we very carefully covered that story. But nobody else does. Nobody. Didn't get into the mainstream media. And if they did mention it, they only mentioned the fact that properties linked to the Prime Minister several years ago, when these very young lads, well, they're still very young lads, but several years ago they would have been even younger, seemed to know where the Prime Minister had lived, which cars he had had. And we can only assume that there is some sort of super injunction preventing anything more from being given to us on this. And the humiliation rituals, they don't stop there. The government has decided in their wisdom that they're going to introduce pauses for 24 hours and up to 4 days when private individuals try and make transactions between themselves. Because, of course, we can't just have people buying and selling stuff between them. You've got to go through a corporation or the government. You can't just have people buy something from somebody else, a private citizen. So, most renters pay their rent from individual to individual. But I mean, I suppose if you're living there, then maybe a 4-day wait isn't so bad. But it would completely kill the ability to sell a car, for example, second-hand. Because the whole deal with that is you sell your car, you get the money, and the other person drives off. So if you've now got to wait between a day and 4 days for this to happen, that is taken as well out of the hands of the private citizens. I suppose so it can be taxed or whatever it is. But no, the humiliation rituals, they don't even stop there. This is remarkable. The British government is requiring illegal immigrants who come over on boats and get put up in hotels, and a lot of them work as delivery drivers. We've covered that at length. There's no dispute that they are doing that. Illegal immigrants in hotels are serving as delivery drivers, Uber Eats and Deliveroo and all the rest of it. The British government wants these people to check our ID when we order a pizza. This chap, there we go, ordered a pizza and was asked to have ID ready for when the illegal immigrant, or maybe this one wasn't illegal, but he probably was. He probably was an illegal immigrant. So the illegal immigrant will come around your house, and before he's going to give you your pizza, he's going to check your ID. It's not because this chap posted his full order. It's not like he ordered a bottle of vodka with it as well or something. It was just a pizza. I think there was a couple of bits of garlic bread in there as well. I mean, what do I say about this? This is complete humiliation. At every turn, we are being humiliated by our government. And they are using the immigration to humiliate us on a daily basis. And if we protest, or if we say something they don't like, the state comes for us with force. And they jail us if we don't like what they're doing. If we don't swallow this humiliation day after day, those police will come for us. Could be worse. This chap ordered a delivery from Uber Eats, and the driver got his alarm went off, and he unfurled his little mat, and he started praying on this guy's property. And apparently the chap who made the order was like, sorry, what the hell are you doing? Can you go away now? And he was just ignored. Sensibly, the chap who was now having to watch his delivery driver prey on his private property on his driveway didn't intervene more forcefully, because, of course, if he did, the British state would jail him. Doesn't matter that guy could well have got off a boat 3 weeks earlier. Humiliation after humiliation after humiliation. At some point, we are really going to have to ask what on earth we are doing in this country and why we continue to tolerate this.